So I like you to be just invite you to be everyone, and then if you can tell a few words from yourself. And thanks again to be with us today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Istvan. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity and asking me to come and share the work that I'm working on. It's been a long journey. My name is Natalie Topa. I work with the Danish Refugee Council, and I'm the Regional Resilience and Livelihoods Coordinator for the East Africa and Great Lakes region. And I continue also to support our Yemen team wherever possible. They used to be part of our region. So I've been living here in East Africa for 15 years. I've been working in the NGO industry and working on humanitarian recovery and development work since 2005. My background is actually urban and regional planning with a focus in economic development. And in the US, I was quite focused on transit-oriented development. But when I came to East Africa, I came in 2005 to work in South Sudan on post-war town planning and reconstruction. And over the last 15 years, I saw a lot of agencies, including my own, focusing on many different activities, but every year we had similar problems of drought and flood cycles and food, water, and energy insecurity. And for me, I just really wanted to start focusing on the root causes of those issues. And so I joined the Danish Refugee Council after having studied permaculture, agroecology, ecofeminism, Gandhian economics, earthworks for water harvesting, many different courses over the last several years, so that I can come and apply that into how we restore community agroecosystems. I work in East Africa, but there's nothing that I'm doing that is Africa specific. Gravity is gravity. So wherever we have gravity in the galaxy, we have to try to store the energy that's coming into our systems, whether that's households, farms, landscapes. So that's just a bit about me.
Yeah. And would you like to share with us about a couple of slideshow and presentation, few pictures for how you implemented that into your life, and how does that work for an everyday? Because you are traveling so much like me all the time.
Yeah.
And I think you are the only person who I've been met the growing mushroom and chicken at the same middle of the couple of million people in the apartment. So,
yeah,
that show us a possibility. I will share for this group and this email address for all your videos, or especially the urban one. It's been amazing what you've been done. You feeding, actually, you giving compost for farmers from your tiny apartment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm exporting. I'm not joking. Well, so first of all, let me clarify. I was living in another apartment for 10 years, and I called it the 5th Floor Farm. If anyone is interested to see a whole video on that, Morag Gamble actually produced a video, and it's on YouTube. It's just, if you search balcony permaculture, it will come up. But essentially, yeah, I mean, in my own household, I was testing a lot of different things, different approaches, large and small, that I could, not only for my own benefit, but things that I could potentially apply to the resilience and livelihoods for the communities that we serve, which are displacement affected population, which means refugees, who are people who exit their country. There are IDPs, internally displaced persons, who are kind of like refugees inside their own countries. And then of course the communities that host them, where, you know, when refugees move from South Sudan into Uganda, the community in which they land is also impacted, and they already also have strained resources. So so the approach now that I'm working on is, you know, we really try to work with all those communities in my organization. So yeah, in my previous apartment, I had to leave due to a mold issue, and no, the mold had nothing to do with the mushrooms that I grow. Everyone is like, this is because you grow mushrooms. No, different mold, aspergillus, not oyster mushroom. I didn't have oyster mushrooms growing out of my lungs. So, but anyway, yes, I still do vermicomposting in my apartment. I have a balcony garden, but in the other, and I do grow mushrooms as well. Actually, God gave me a grain spawn for oyster mushrooms, so thank you for that. They have exploded, and I'm actually having that for lunch today. So anyone who's interested in really small scale permaculture at the apartment level, there's a whole video on that. Now, moving into how I bring that into my work, you know, I've studied permaculture, I'm a permaculturalist, I hold those ethics, and those ethics I apply to my work. And, you know, I think everything that I have been trying to bring to my agency and the work that we do is proving to be so relevant right now in the era of COVID, because, you know, in the 15 years that I've been working in my industry, I've seen a lot of things work and a lot of failures as well. And so I think that the world is transforming at this moment. We also need to transform as an industry how we approach resilience for vulnerable households. So a lot of agencies focus on market systems and market systems facilitation and development, but the thing is that we have to understand is that food security is not a function of the market, okay? We are the only species that pay for food, so there's something wrong with our model. So, you know, yes, obviously we've got trade and imports and exports that will continue to happen around the world, but the point right now, as we all sit in our little hunkered down situations, is where's the market? So market, now that you've been all, you know, you may be having your little disruption, but we still need to eat, okay? So that means we have to grow food, and we cannot rely on market access because it's so fickle and tied to geopolitical and these natural disasters and things like Yemen, for example, as well. So you know, applying this, I'm taking permaculture now and resilience design and working with communities to say, first of all, there's a wealth of resources wherever you are. You just have, you know, you have to use what you have. And so applying that now into the work that we're doing at 3 different levels that I'll talk about: the household level, the farm level, as well as the landscape and community level. So I guess we can start on the first slide. I think the other Istvan is, I'm having some technical difficulties today. Despite the fact I'm sitting here with 2 computers, I had to use my iPhone to take photographs of my slides and send them to you. So we're still, you know, again, this is why we can't rely on technology for our resilience. So the first slide is the title slide. So I'm calling it Permaculture for Community Agroecosystems and Resilience in COVID Times. So, you know, agroecosystems is just bringing back partnership of humans and the natural landscape that we're situated in. And that's the ecosystem, the natural world that we're surrounded by, how we fit food abundance and our basic needs into that. So if we just go down to the next slide. So I'm going to just talk about 3 major levels that we work on. We do household level permagardens, resilient farm design, and again, the landscape level interventions. So for the household permagardens, you know, we work with community members, whether they're displaced or not, to audit all the different forms of waste that they have in and around their home. So all kinds of food scraps, compound sweepings, you know, the dead, dried leaves that they sweep from around the house, wastewater from washing, from bathing, where we operate in Muslim communities where people are washing feet for ablution, that can be 1 liter per day, 5 times a day for 1 person. So if you have a family of 5 people, you know, 25 liters of water is quite a bit when you're talking about doing a daily, just small irrigation of some little guilds around the shelter. So use of household food, water, and compound waste. The permagarden always has a water harvesting swale on contour to feed that. And then we call it a permagarden. It's not a permaculture garden. It's a specific model that has these components that I'll talk about. We do double dug beds on contour, and then it usually has a gray water mulch base with like a banana circle, or what I call a water guild, a guild of very water loving things for wastewater. So that permagardens have to have all those things. For resilient farm design, we are talking about harvesting stormwater runoff. And like, you know, if you think about, you know, the farm is not an island, it's connected to other things outside. So that includes the flow of water and nutrient and energy. So sometimes you have a footpath or a road or an erosion gully near the farm that will continue to be more destructive as it goes downhill. Instead, what we're doing is channeling that, harnessing that energy, bringing it into the farm from roads, paths, gullies, and erosion scars. We bring that into biosoils on contour, and we try to do alley cropping, especially in the arid areas where we are, to reduce the ambient temperatures a bit, create a microclimate, and also create fast carbon pathways so that we've got mulch. In many areas, we have major deforestation. So obviously, if you're a Permi, you understand the value of having to get trees into the system so that you can have biomass as quickly as possible for those fast carbon pathways to build soil health. We also work on food forestry. So in all the farms, we try to do a food forest. I'm really trying to encourage farms to have a minimum of 20 to 30% of tree cover, or at least some perennial stability. Let me say that, perennial stability in the farm system, so that we're not also reliant on the annualization of crops. I think that's something else we have to be resilient to. So we do food forestry, and we also have a strong focus on indigenous seeds and responsible exotics. So what does that mean? I am rabidly against giving seeds to vulnerable people that don't reproduce and don't retain their reproductive viability for the long term. I think it's unethical, very, very much so. So what I mean is that, a seed is an embryo with a genetic memory. The reason that we have food today is because for tens of thousands of years, our human ancestors have been saving seeds and adapting them in partnership with nature. And to come now and give seeds that are improved and all these things, it's not the seeds that need to be improved, it's the practices, the soil, and all that. So the other thing about the tree species is here in East Africa, there's a very huge focus on eucalyptus and grevillea and pine species, which are replacing native biodiversity, which is also not okay because it's destroying the soil structure, so we have massive, massive erosion. So responsible exotics, like I definitely try to integrate bamboo wherever I can. If there's already a local bamboo, we do try to use that. We try to use the local bamboo from within that country and bring it to where we're working and get that in. Soil erosion, fast carbon, high silica, mulch, all that kind of stuff. So I'll show some examples about that. And then also on the landscape level interventions, aside from just the immediate household or the farm, looking at what can be done at the larger landscape level to mitigate those extreme weather and climate events. So everything from flood to drought. And also, we talk about flood and drought here in East Africa, but those are not the only natural disasters. We also have increasing wind gusts that becomes like small tornadoes, more rampant wildfires, very huge gusts of wind, all these things that used to be filtered through forest systems, but as those are gone, communities and houses become much more subject to just the forces of nature. So, a roof can be blown off of a mud hut, or wildfires can go for much longer. So the things that we're doing for the landscape level interventions are things like FMNR, or farmer managed natural regeneration. So it's really, how do we prune and train trees to give them a big growth spurt and start to populate that upper forest canopy. We always try to make a water harvesting structure around trees. And then do them in a pattern that's also water harvesting. We're doing things like check dams, one rock dams, poor man's swales, or big stones on contour as a stone swale. We're doing gully and ravine restoration, and then also large scale resilience design for infrastructure. So unfortunately, because of the tech issues and things I was having today, I don't think I got photos of the biggest project we're doing in terms of infrastructure. But again, we've just released a video on YouTube, and if you search DRC Resilience Design for Infrastructure, that will pop up, and you can watch that video of what we've done there, because it's big and it's awesome. So we can go on now to the next slide. Okay, so here, this is just an image from Kakuma. We are with some Turkana tribes people in this community. And this is just showing you that the first thing that we do is we go into the community and we recognize that we are not the experts. We don't know anything about this place. I'm talking about DRC, our teams, our field staff, and also, as you know, Istvan, in some of these trainings, Warren Brush is with me. And so in some of the trainings, Warren and I co-facilitate. And so here we, with Warren, are in Kakuma, and we are doing a community resource mapping and collection exercise. So basically, it's just a moment that we have the community go and collect tons and tons of resources, and then we put everything on the ground and we all sit in a big circle, and then they share with us, and it can take hours, but they share with us all the richness they have in ethnobotany and all the different materials and resources they have for soil building or whatever. A funny story I like to tell is the lady on the right in the blue, she was holding this funny cactus, and she said, "This is a very, very useful plant. If you have some blemish on your skin or some acne, you can just squeeze the juice of this cactus and put it on your skin. Or if the hyenas are bothering your camels and livestock, you can just dip the cactus in blood and throw it to the hyena, and it will kill the hyena." And I was like, wow, talk about stacking functions. So this is just, this is just looking at all the different types of things that they have and things that we can use to build soil fertility and other uses. All right, next slide. In the next slide, this is just, again, part of our process is showing, I think the other Istvan needs to show the next slide.
Istvan, next slide.
Maybe he stepped out for a minute or something.
What's that?
Okay.
What's the problem?
I think he's just out the room.
And Natalie, just a few words about this. Very interesting when you say it's a community resource mapping. What is including about for this? Because I think it's necessary for redoing. Every little community must start to be do that, and that's where we start all our resource and how we can be turning into useful connections.
Yeah,
so the resource mapping, what is including when you're working with it?
So, I mean, wherever you are, if it's in your house, if it's in a community, in a village, in a whatever, you want to understand what are all the useful things around us. And so what we do is we break out into teams. So we have DRC staff go with, maybe 5, 6 teams, depending how many people we have in the community. In this photo, we have 50 people from the community and about 20 or 25 people from DRC, and they got some buckets and basins, and we just told them go for 30 minutes and walk as teams, and we tell our DRC staff, you want to let the community member be the leader here, right? Don't guide them, they're guiding you and showing and picking up. And so they go around and things that they find, it can be discarded waste materials, it can be plants, it can be certain seeds, it can be different herbs that they use for different ailments, and then so then they come back and then go through them and discuss them. So it's not a complex process. It's just a reflection on what are all the things that we have here, and what are really what is the wealth of resources that surrounds us that maybe we haven't thought of before. Okay, so go back one slide. Yeah, so in this picture, we just we show them how to make some simple tools. We don't bring anything in from outside other than just basic items. But I really am trying to demonstrate through all the work I'm doing is that we, farmers and smallholder people producing food don't need to. Can somebody mute their mic? I think this is some feedback. If somebody can mute.
It's on me.
Anyways, okay, so so they don't need to rely on outside support from NGOs. They can be self-reliant, and they can really have abundant, thriving food systems using just what they have around them. So we just bring in basic tools. Here we're showing them how to make an A-frame. We really make sure that they, you know, are having the hands-on experience and doing it themselves, especially women. And it's funny, there's always a tendency in these trainings, the men will kind of rush in and, you know, grab things from women, the hammer, let me do it. And that's when I'm like, whoa, all the men step back, let the ladies do this, so that at the end of the day, the women, and many of them are women-headed households, know by themselves how to create the tools that they need. So if we go to the next slide, here we're just showing them, do we got the next slide? Is it, no, sorry. Go back one. Yeah, so here we're showing them how to measure a swale on contour and how to dig that. So we're really, you know, taking them through every step of the process as a community. And if we go to the next slide. So this is an example of what we're calling a perma garden. Now, unfortunately, this was not a successful perma garden. You know, I think also just the way we had selected a woman named Regina, who was super vulnerable. She was a widow. She also had a daughter, you know, an adult daughter who was mentally ill, and then that daughter had a little baby. And I just think that there was a lot of strain on the household as it was, and then to get them to understand, like, the, you know, to support them in the management and maintenance of it, it was just really difficult for them to keep up. So, it kind of, you know, when I show this image, it's really to show what I mean by perma garden, but I don't want to say that this is a success story. So what you can see here, there's a couple elements. You can see the swale on contour, and we are in a dryland area. We're using rock mulch inside the swale. And then, of course, along the contour of the swale, we do these double dug beds, which are, you know, can be 60 to 80 centimeters deep, and we pack them full of some of the materials that we had already collected with the community. So things like manure and charcoal, and not a lot of ash here because it's quite, you know, alkaline environment. But sticks and twigs and leaves, brown leaves, green leaves, different kinds of manure. I even like to get soil. If there's a healthy forest nearby, go and get some of that healthy soil, bring those microorganisms, stick them in the bed. But the point is, you'll see, like, as the rain falls, it fills that deep bed, and that becomes like a water storage tank with a garden on top. So those are some of the key elements that have to be in a perma garden. I'm not talking about a permaculture garden, but this model, as it was developed by USAID and TOPS program for Food for Peace, it's specifically, you know, water harvesting structure, banana circle or gray water mulch basin system, and then these deep dug beds on contour. We always fence it. So yeah. So that's just an example. So if we go on to the next slide, so, you know, as we train people, they're adapting them to their own places. So, and, you know, this can be done in a different small space, tiny space, it doesn't matter. Wherever you have gravity, these principles still apply. So in the upper left-hand corner, that is Danisa, she's in Tanzania, and the image directly below her are greens that she was able to harvest very, very quickly after the garden was done. And since this intervention, not a day has passed that she's been without green vegetables. In the middle there, that with a black top, funny looking thing, that is a perma garden that we did in Burundi at the house of Evelyn. And she, so I don't have the latest pictures, but I just wanted also to show structurally, you know, we've got that swale on contour, and we always try to do a bamboo trellis also. Nowadays, and that's also more surface area for growing, as well as protection from evaporation for the swale. But again, those are double dug beds. Actually, those were down 90 centimeters deep. And then on the right, we have a very, very small little perma garden, and this is just done at a IDP shelter in Somalia. But they're optimizing the shade, the shady side of their shelter, and, you know, trying to do the soil building principles. So, you know, there's a lot of different styles of the gardens and how people are adapting these concepts to their very, very small living spaces. And again, optimizing household waste, food waste, and wastewater for the garden. So the next slide is, okay, so this is just a before and after shot. This is the perma garden of Chilina. Chilina is from Equatoria in South Sudan, and she is now in Adjumani, in Aleri settlement in Uganda. But you can see here, like, you know, there were very, very many rocks. If you can see in the foreground, it's just covered with stones. And she and Martha, her colleague also from South Sudan, they said, you know, when we came here, we didn't know how to do this soil. We've never seen soil with stones and rocks in it. So for them, it was like a curse, you know, because they came and it was nothing but rocks. But then when we started to dig out, we used the stones to do mulching, to do silt traps, to do, you know, borders around the garden beds. They realized that actually even the stones themselves were a resource. This is an interesting point for me, because one thing I'm interested in is, you know, if a refugee or due to mixed migration, people move from one bioregion to another, how do they adapt to that new bioregion? There are new plants, new soil types, new climates, new slope, all these things. And so what I love about our approach to bringing permaculture into this context is that it helps people. It's a survival toolkit for regardless of what bioregion you go in. So anyway, this garden even looks much better now, but because I've changed computers, I was trying to find all my photos. You can't even see the bamboo trellis on the right. It's completely covered in greens, and Shalina has gone on to expand the garden and adding more land and just doing a whole larger system. So, and obviously she's getting tons of food. She's spending less money on food. And as I say, these perma gardens is like a 3D printer for money, because it's just, you know, every day the leaves are just scooting up through the ground, and you can clip those and go and sell those in the market. And so there's also some income generating element as well. So we can go on to the next slide. So now I'm starting to talk about resilient farm design. So when we train our teams, we build on these concepts. So it's the same, you know, harvesting of water, of nutrient, of energy, and getting that into longer term hydration, so that the soil is drought proofed. And so that even after the last rain in the rainy season, you still have some moisture in the soil that can still help to support crops after the rain has gone. And especially when we have that perennial stability, you have trees around and bananas and things, and more perennial beans and passion vines. That's the life support system to your annual crops. And so here in the farm design, what we're doing is really trying to encourage people to do more alley cropping. So these are photos from the in Kibondo in Tanzania from Danisa. And Danisa, where we did her small permagarden, we also did the farm. And, you know, she was sweeping her compound all over just to get the leaves and, you know, everything away from her home. And that created this hardscape with a lot of runoff that was just pouring, you know, pummeling downhill. And so up on the left side of both of these photos, we did a food forest. And every one of those bamboo baskets has a little baby tree inside. And that, you know, in the planting hole, we do tons of amendments as well to, you know, just spongify and fertilize that soil and do water moisture retention. But then each individual, it's what I call a smile berm. Every tree has what I call a smile berm because it looks like a smile, but it can also be called a demi-lune or a boomerang berm or whatever you want to call it. But we do it in a fish scale pattern, which I'll talk about a bit later. So here on Denise's farm, you've got on the left side a food forest planted out in a water harvesting way. And then below that, we've got also a water harvesting swale that is fed through a major erosion gully that's eroding her farm. So on both sides of her farm, she has these huge gullies that, you know, obviously accumulate water and they're eating her farm. So we just directed it passively into her farm, and then we have 3 major swales, and the water just fills and gently spills, fills and spills from one structure to the next, and then it exits on the other side of her farm to take some of that flooding pressure off the farms below her farm. So, you know, we've got, again, got bamboo trellises. We have planted some trees below the swale as well as the food forest. And then if we go to the next slide, so this is what it is starting to look like now. And you can see, I mean, it's just, I mean, awesome. I love it. I love looking at these photos. She had a baby since the training. She was pregnant during the training, and you know, she has so much variety of food. She's eating huge nutritional diversity every day. She's able to sell. She's not spending money on food. She's able to sell food. She's able to provide her neighbors with some food. And also she's learning on her own as well. She said that she was always weeding her maize, but she's actually finding that in this jungle, in this green jungle, the maize is doing super well. So she's just leaving it alone because it seems to be really happy there. So I love the story about Denisa, and it's just going to get better and better because we did plant a lot of trees, and it's going to get more verticality and be more three-dimensional and just more stable as it diversifies and grows out. So if we go to the next slide, what did I put in the next slide? So I'm talking here about some of the ways that we plant trees. There are many ways to plant trees, but especially in the drylands areas where everything is rain fed, and oftentimes, you know, the watering of plants and gardens and trees is still dependent on the woman who has to fetch that water from, you know, faraway places. And so we try to do everything we can to passively harvest nutrient and water that's flowing downhill in a rain, and to store that energy for as long as possible to feed that baby tree. So you see on the right hand side, we have a hole, that's the planting hole, and you know that will also house the bamboo basket. That's where the tree goes, and the water collects down below in that little berm. And then you always select a side which is lower, and the water will pour out from the lower side into the next structure, into the next, into the next. So the one on the left, this photo you can see on the left, that is in Kakuma, in a very, very dry land. And the only thing that's really growing there is Prosopis juliflora, which is the mesquite. Here they call it the double tree. They really don't like it. So anyway, you can see here that we have more of a boomerang berm. And then in the center of that is a tree that was planted, and we didn't have bamboo baskets, but we just asked the community to show us how they fence something. So they made these shrines, like these green cages for the trees. And then you can see what's happening here. This little boomerang has filled up with water, and then on the right hand side, the overflow is already going now down to a lower boomerang berm. And so we're just creating like a prison for water, or a security checkpoint. And we don't want any water to escape that system. And this is incredibly important when we're talking about our dryland context. You know, I covered Djibouti, Somalia, the whole arid and semi-arid lands of Kenya, of southern Ethiopia. All of these landscapes are really, really parched right now because of major ecological degradation and deforestation. So we really got to make landscapes that are like Velcro for water. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so here I'm just trying to show how the pattern that I'm talking about. So here we have some drone footage of what I mean by fish scale pattern. So many Permies already know this, that, you know, we're trying to just get that water from one structure to the next, and that's what it looks like from an aerial view. And then on the right hand side, it's the same image, but just a section view of the same trees with the baskets planted out. So that was in Uganda, and that was in Nevi Town, and I think we did about 115 different tree species. This is for a school that abuts a community, and we did a lot of other work here in terms of spring line recharge and other things that we did with this community, but I didn't want to talk for 10 hours about all the work we're doing, so I was trying to be selective. If we go to the next slide. Yeah, so here we are talking about some of the larger landscape level interventions for mitigating extreme events, by which I mean both flood and drought, shocks and stresses. And so this again was in Mananaruai near Kakuma. It was the same village in the beginning where we showed the photos of the resource mapping. And here in this photo, what you're seeing is that basically, you know, the community is located in this alluvium of this bowl, this catchment, that gets about 43 million liters of water per year, yet people complain there's no water. And when we told them how much is actually in that catchment, they couldn't believe that that's how much water is being lost. So we just did a we did a large swale up at the very, very top. That was the largest because of silt. We wanted that to, you know, be able to accommodate the most amount of silt coming down the hill. And then what we found is when we came back for the second training, we did 2 trainings in one location, is the community were really happy that the flood mitigation did work, and they were not having the impacts of flood that they had, but they really wanted to be able to access that water for their livestock. And so what we did is we busted through the swale, the berm. And the interesting thing was that, you know, we came months later and it was so dry. But when you cut open that swale, you don't normally do a lot of swale dissection, but you could see how much moisture was still retained, even though it was baking hot and the last rain was months and months before that. There was still moisture inside the berm of the swale when we cut it open with the excavator. And then we retrofitted it with a livestock watering dam, which has apparently, I've not been there recently, has never dried up. And so they have year-round water now for their livestock. The women use the silty clay for plastering their homes, and it has completely mitigated the flood for the community. So, you know, this is, sometimes even in my own agency or industry, people are like, oh, you're the agriculture person. This is not about agriculture. This is about buffering the community from the extremes of this major ecological collapse that's happening here. It is related to agriculture because what we're doing is we're increasing the capacity of the entire system to be productive and more high yielding. So anyway, so if we go on to the next slide. Okay, so here, this is in Burundi, and I'm working on a project in Burundi where I'm calling it the resilient colline. Colline in French means hill, and the landscape of Burundi is very undulating and rolling hills and green, but they've suffered from massive deforestation, and as a result, they have huge landslides and flash floods. And in fact, there's a lot of displacement of Burundians in neighboring countries because of political reasons, but it's estimated by the government that 70% of the people who are internally displaced to the country are displaced because of flash floods and landslides, and their land just literally just slides off of the mountain and they can't live there anymore. I don't know that it's as high as 70%, but the point is that this country suffers in a very huge way from the impacts of extreme water events. So on this colline, this hill, 5 people already have died in recent years from flash floods. And you can see here on the left side is this a big gully, which is becoming a small canyon. Now, if you look at the footpath to the right, that people are walking on, the gully used to be the footpath, and footpaths are compacted and they become a hardscape where water runs off and accumulates and small waters become big waters. This picture to the left is heading a little bit towards the bottom of the mountain, but the ones on the right are towards the top. And so we started the very top of the mountain, and we have just done everything we can to try to improve or slow down the water at the top. When I do the trainings, I always ask people, I tell them, oh, when I shower, I like to take a towel and I start drying my body starting at my feet, and then I come up, and then they scream, no, that's not the way, you have to start at your head. And I asked, well, why is that? And they said, because all the water is collecting and moving down, so you should start at the top to stop it. And I said, great, so that's our mountain, and that's how we have to start, at the top. So we start at the top of the mountain. We're doing lots of FM&R, again, the training and pruning and chop and drop of the trees to expedite that canopy, build the forest floor, and then around each of the individual trees, we do that water harvesting smile berm. Not around every single tree, but key trees, locations where it's contributing to flood. So here on the paths, we are doing all kinds of check dams in many different, so we've got, you can see here, we broke up into 6 teams. I was leading these 6 teams on the mountain, running up and down, and they're doing different things. So we've got, starting at the top, all these different footpaths that we're just trying to sort of terrace off and level off and slow and sink that water into the ground there. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so this is connected to resilient farms and landscape level interventions because it's a system. So here, what you can see is that on the footpaths, we're diverting the water from the footpaths. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the presentation on my computer. So we create rolling dips and little structures that are armored, because when you ask water to turn direction, you have to armor it, and also manage the silting, which we do get here quite a bit. But basically, here's the footpath, and we want that every 5 to 10 meters on this footpath, water is diverted into a farm or into a swale or into a tree system or whatever. Just get it off of the path and into the farm. It's what I call getting, water from destruction to production, or from floods to food. So, we're by solving this problem, which is a major problem for the community, we're hugely increasing the capacity of Evelyn's farm here to just be way more productive, way more diversified. We've done food forest, we've got the swales on contour, bamboo trellises, have planted out with passion vines and perennials. So yeah, here, this is what I call path water harvesting and into the resilient design of the farm. So when we do the farms, we're always thinking about, people always talk about stormwater runoff. How do we deal with the stormwater runoff, but not the stormwater run on? How does the farm reach its arms out into the upper hill areas and bring that water, increase that catchment, bring that water into the farm? So, so the next slide. Okay, so here we're talking about like the gully restoration, and again, just using only materials that we have. What we did here is that, well, actually this was Daniel Lawton's idea, was first to put goats. So what we did is we chopped off some of the sides of the gully, which was quite, steep walled, and we beveled that a bit, and then we put goats. I think we had not many, we weren't able to get too many. We had maybe 5 goats, and we just let them in there for the day. And the idea is that, as they kind of scurry on the walls a bit, and, they're doing some light compaction and pooping and bringing seeds and things like that. So here, we use bamboo stakes, and then behind the bamboo stakes, we put bananas horizontally. And so we're just creating little tiny check dams or leaky weirs. And here on the right-hand side, you can see that, not a great picture because it was raining on us, but you can already see how there's a terracing effect as the water's coming down and building up. So what we did, just so you're aware, on this, like on the structure itself, I tried to show a close-up photo of this gentleman who's building the bamboo check dam. Behind the check dam on the uphill side, we're packing it full of organic material. So leaves and dried brown banana leaves and just grasses and everything, just really pack that in and create that sponge that will break down. It will help to filter debris and organic matter that's coming through, plant debris. But then below that, in order to prevent having a head cut, we want that skirting. So below the check dam, we put those rock stones so that can take the impact from the water spilling over and prevent the erosion. So that's on gully restoration. But again, it's the whole system of this community, getting that water locked into the whole mountain to replenish their groundwater resources, and at the surface level, bring back lots of fertility, but again, reduce that major hazards they're having from these major water events. Okay, so the next slide. Is the next slide up? I can't see. Ishwan, are you seeing an excavator?
It's an excavator, and on the right is somebody making what looks like a ladder.
Oh, it's a bridge. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Great. So this is, that's a bridge. In Africa, that's a bridge. So here what we're doing is borehole recharge, and this is something that is really important in my industry, because we are always installing new water points and water resources like boreholes, and we don't think about where is that water coming from and how does it get recharged. And so, it is our responsibility in the water community to ensure that we are not pulling more water out of the ground than we are putting in. We have to put more in than we are pulling out. So this is just above a borehole where we went in and did a big swale. This was actually, part of it was on, I think, 2% grade, and then it leveled off, and then the the spillway is into a big ravine, which is a giant logger, which used to be a perennial river. But the point is that we're catching this water below a shallow well. Well, it's it's 10 meters. So yeah, it's about 30 feet. So obviously, if you're doing deep, you're talking about deep groundwater sources, that's a much larger systemic level that you have to do. But around the shallower water sources, here we were able to capture huge amounts of water and refill it. And the community were very happy because this was fresh and sweet water. So the women were using this water from this borehole for consumption, for their teas and cooking. But the government had made a borehole up above, which was more salted, way beyond human consumption. So that's what they use for bathing and for washing. And then, yeah, this is just a little bridge to the borehole over the swale that we dug. So next slide. Okay, are you seeing a graphic that I drew? Okay, so basically, you know, in our context, where we deal with camps and settlements and shelters and communities, you know, I try to encourage our teams to understand that it's a system. And, you know, there's ecological systems, there's market systems, there's cultural and social and governance structures that we need to understand. And so, you know, the way that we can support the restoration of community agroecosystems is to understand as much as possible about this place that we're in. Even if we claim it's going to be temporary, but it's not. You know, you can build a refugee camp in the midst of an emergency, and if you do it the wrong way, that's a long-term mistake that can be there for generations. And so we have a lot of opportunities, we have a lot of resources within our industry to just zoom out a little bit, understand how these different pieces work together, and what within our purview can we do to make sure that we're making those connections and helping to stabilize that environment so that people have the things that they need to meet their basic needs without having to survive. Without having to rely on market systems. And so, you know, this is an approach I very much believe in. We're seeing successes. And the other thing is that it's based on the technology is based on ancient innovation. And many of the communities that I'm working with, there's something nostalgic about this process that they trust, because it speaks to the way that they did things a long time ago. And then we're told that's primitive, that's not development. So for me, resilience is not about chemical farming. It is not about, you know, petrochemical neurotoxic poisons. That's part of a death system that's rooted in war, including fertilizers. And for me, growing food is about life. And so we want to move in the direction where we're focusing only on agroecology and agroforestry, using permaculture design for climate action and for COVID action. And we also have here in East Africa, LOVID, we have the locust crisis. So, you know, this is the solution, this is the answer to very many problems.